Welcome back in, everybody. It's so good to have you on here, Sports and Money, the YouTube channel. I am Benjamin Parker. I am so glad to have you back with us. A little bit different thing tonight. We're looking at some college football. It'll be a little bit sloppy. I don't know how much of this I'll do during the season, but I spent a lot of time watching college football over this weekend. I was able to just put together a lot of good notes on several players, especially guys who might be showing up at the NFL level. And again, most of the work that I do is at the NFL level in terms of coverage. So a lot of times when I'm watching college football over the weekend, what I'm really looking for is, if I had an NFL team, what players are standing out? Who do I really like? What attribute does somebody offer that maybe I can't get somewhere else? And so a lot of the guys that we'll cover here tonight will kind of fall into that category. I'll try to move through them pretty quick. One of the games I watched was the North Carolina-South Carolina game that came on Saturday night, I think. And decent matchup. I'm going to basically hit Drake Maye and Spencer Rattler from this. I'm not going to cover anybody else that showed up that night as far as NFL prospects. But let's start with Drake Maye. Drake Maye already owned a lot of people's boards as a very high draft pick. And listen, that doesn't always mean anything. We've seen two guys from the past two seasons that were way up at the top of everybody's boards who completely fell down the boards come draft night. So that doesn't always mean anything. What means something is that you actually watched a guy on tape and you still like him when it's time to draft him. So Drake Maye was a guy already gotten a lot of recognition, had a fun year last year, really racked up tons of yardage and tons of numbers for the North Carolina offense last year, and really liked a lot of what he did last year. Saturday, you're looking to see if he can repeat that against an SEC school. Again, it's not a top defense, but still I think would be a pretty good defense by most measures. So Drake Maye working against a pretty good defense on Saturday. And I really liked everything I saw out of Drake Maye for the most part. I'm going to go through what I didn't like here in a second. But let me start with the things I do like. Number one is his running ability. We see tons and tons of players every year at quarterback who have this playmaking ability, and that's going to continue to feed on up into the NFL. Most quarterbacks in the future will be able to do that. So that's not unusual. But what I do like about Drake Maye is he does seem to have a little bit of electricity to him, a little bit of a second gear. He can run straight line very fast. He's a handful at that. He can cut, even say once he gets past that line of scrimmage level. He's kind of up there in the second level. He can cut quick enough to move a linebacker and actually pick up another 5, 10, 15 yards. So he's very dangerous with his feet. He's not just scrambling along to extend a play, and he's not just scrambling to pick up 5 or 10 yards for a first down. He can actually do some damage. Now, I don't put him in the Caleb Williams or the Lamar Jackson category. He's not quite that fast with his feet. But still, he has a difference-making ability. More than just playmaking, more than just scrambling. He actually can pick up very large chunks of yardage because he is fast in a straight line, and he has that cut move that he can do, very similar to a running back, what a running back can do in the backfield. So I really like that from Drake Maye. It's an incredibly valuable tool. It really makes a difference when you're trying to figure out how to guard him, because again, this isn't just somebody making plays, extending plays. This is somebody who can actually beat you downfield with his feet. I like that from Drake Maye. We saw it some last year. We saw it again against the Gamecocks Saturday. Then his arm strength was a bit of a question for me coming into the year. And again, when I say arm strength, people instantly start to get an idea in their head that, hey, we saw him make a 40-yard play in last year's game against so-and-so, and we saw him make this other 50-yard pass to a guy in week 9 of last year's season. And that's really not the measure of arm strength. When you're talking about arm strength, it's not can he get the ball to all parts of the field. Most quarterbacks can do that. That's why they're a quarterback. But the point of being a quarterback who has arm strength is, can you consistently challenge defenses down the field farther than 20 yards, 25, 30, even 40 yards? Now, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they can challenge defenses at 50 and 60 yards. I mean, it's incredible their kind of bombing ability, really, the cannon arm. And Drake Maye doesn't have that, but Drake Maye certainly continued to show on Saturday that he can beat defenses, he can challenge defenses at 25, 30, and even 40 yards, not just to receivers who are wide open. And listen, he did hit some receivers who were wide open. That's part of a good North Carolina offense. They've had for several seasons now. But we saw that he could actually challenge defenses downfield deep, 25 to 40 yard range, with receivers that were reasonably well covered. And that's something there that really, really starts to elevate a guy up the draft board. There's no question about it. That arm strength ability really elevates a guy up. And again, he doesn't have the Mahomes, Josh Allen kind of a bombing ability, but he's consistently got that ability to beat defenses deeper than, say, your average quarterback can. So I really like that. We saw some of that again on Saturday. And the other thing is, we really saw him work the lower part of the field as well. He really seemed to be very comfortable. And again, not all offenses are created equal. Some offenses do an amazing job. They have a lot of talent at running back and wide receiver, and they just throw lots of screens and in routes and out routes and challenge every defense vertically and horizontally. Well, North Carolina has a good bit of talent on offense, but they don't have that kind of talent to consistently do that on just every play. So what you do see from Drake Maye is that he doesn't necessarily need that kind of play calling to be successful. What you really see is a guy who can work the 10 to 20 yard range as well. He seems to be very aware of where his receivers are, and even if they are reasonably well covered, he can still get the ball to them in a way that they can catch it. So I like that too, that he seems to have that ability, not just arm strength deep, but seem to really show that he has a good feel for the 10 to 20 range as well. And again, not always to open receivers. That's really the key. When you see a guy consistently throw into receivers that are just open all the time, and that's how he's getting to 300 or 400 yards, you have the right to question, well, how good is he really? Drake Maye did some of that, but there were still plenty of moments where he was throwing to guys who were reasonably well covered. So again, I like just about everything I saw of Drake Maye. He's got the daring, he's got the gunslinger mentality, he's got the ability. There were a couple of times where the decision-making wasn't great. In particular, that first interception that he threw. He's over there on the sidelines. He's kind of throwing over against the grain. That's a really poor decision, and I don't like that. But again, that's not something you consistently see out of Drake Maye from one play to the next. He doesn't consistently put the football in harm's way, and that's a huge thing. You're not consistently quarter in and quarter out seeing him come up with plays that are almost interceptions. Pretty consistently, you're seeing him put the ball in good places where only his receiver can get it. Now, that brings up accuracy issues. So he's not the most accurate quarterback in the world. I like his accuracy. It's fine. It's not quite to the laser pinpoint that we saw from Kenny Pickett at Pittsburgh 2 years ago. The accuracy is good. Can he get better? Yes. But even if he doesn't necessarily get better in terms of accuracy, he's still accurate enough to where you're very comfortable with what he can do. But you would like to see him improve the accuracy as well, if for no other reason than just to boost the yak yardage that the receivers and running backs get. That's really the main thing he needs to do. It's not that he's throwing balls that are uncatchable. It's that he just can try to work better on getting the football to those receivers where they can really move after the play, and that just kind of builds up your bonus points, if you will, for a quarterback. So I like Drake Maye. It's a lot of jibber-jabber there about Maye. He showed me a lot on Saturday that I hope to see throughout the season, but if he keeps showing that, then he's certainly a guy that I would want to draft very high. And, as thirsty as the NFL teams are, that means all the way up at number 2 or 3 or something like that is where he would probably go. Spencer Rattler is a guy that had a good night as well. And it was tough to tell because the Gamecocks didn't score a lot of points. And Spencer Rattler got sacked a whole bunch of times, and Spencer Rattler was running for his life most of the night. But what I really liked about Spencer Rattler was he consistently made a lot of good throws too, and not a surprise really. Spencer Rattler was very much ballyhooed coming out of high school and into Oklahoma, and then he had to leave there because it looked like Caleb Williams was going to get the job there, and so he goes to South Carolina. So, Spencer Rattler has had a bit of a checkered history in terms of on-field consistency. But Saturday, even though the points weren't up, and listen, South Carolina couldn't run the football. The offensive line struggled to block in terms of creating holes for running backs. And South Carolina couldn't block the rushers coming. They were all over Spencer Rattler. So Spencer Rattler really had no help at all on Saturday. But he still made a lot of good throws, and that's what I like to see. The yardage was there. He still was able to move the football down the field in terms of eating up lots of yardage. And the throws were good. You didn't see a lot of bad throws all night. You saw him, in spite of the fact that he's running for his life, you could see him consistently back foot and everything, making good throws to lots of different parts of the field. So while I wouldn't necessarily at this point be looking at Spencer Rattler in the first round, Rattler is a guy that I very much would love to draft in the third, fourth round, something like that. If I were an NFL team, it would help me in terms of depth. I might have a guy I could start in a season or two at the NFL level, even if he doesn't turn out to be a big-time starter at the NFL level. I can save a lot of money there at quarterback and spread that money around the roster. So keep an eye on Spencer Rattler. He's had some good games in the past. Consistency has been a problem. It may get worse this year, the better defenses he plays, because North Carolina typically doesn't have a super strong defense. I think they're getting better, especially with Gene Chizik there as the DC. But as he plays some of these other defenses, it may be hard for Spencer Rattler to show how good he can be if the offensive line doesn't get better and get better quick. But keep an eye on that. Spencer Rattler making the throws, making good decisions, making good throws. If he keeps doing that, even if the Gamecocks have a rough year, Rattler could still get drafted at a reasonably decent round come the draft next spring. I think that's it on North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm going to hop real quick over on Florida, Utah. I don't have a whole lot to say about the Florida-Utah draft prospects, but this was just something I did notice as I went through Saturday. And that is, Florida has the same problem right now that they had when I watched them back in December of 2021 against Central Florida in that bowl game. And that was that Florida just doesn't look as fast or as athletic as the Gator teams we're used to seeing. They just don't. We have, listen, I grew up during the Spurrier years in the 90s, and then during the, my young adulthood was spent all during the Urban Meyer years. And, like most of you, we've seen the Florida Gators put out some of the fastest, most talented, most amazing teams, both on offense and defense down through the years. And they're just not there right now. But they're not even close. Matter of fact, you can forget reaching the Florida standard right now. They're struggling to even be better athletically and speed-wise as teams like the Utah Utes and teams like Central Florida. And I don't mean disrespect to Utah or Central Florida, because both of those programs are very good. And I fully realize, listen, that Utah team is a tough team, might even finish in the top 10 this year. They are brutal. That program has got it going on. They are rolling. But there is just really no reason, all things considered, there is no reason for the Florida Gators not to have one of the fastest teams in college football every single season. And they just don't. They don't have it at edge rusher. They don't have it at wide receiver. They don't have it at running back consistently. They don't have it at quarterback. You just don't see it anywhere. They don't have it at defensive back. They don't consistently have that speed or that athleticism, and that's something we're not used to seeing from the Florida Gators. Now, that's not Billy Napier's fault. This really started before he got there. He hasn't been there long enough to be able to change that. But it is his problem. He's the one who's going to have to fix it. And somehow, listen, you can't fix that during the season. He's not going to be able to change it then. They are basically stuck with the personnel they've got, right? They can figure out a way to play less sloppy and pick up more victories this year. But in terms of speed and athleticism, it is way, way down from what we've seen out of the Gators over the past several seasons, over the past 20 to 25 years. Way, way down. I'm hoping Billy Napier can get that back up over the next couple of seasons. It won't take just one off season. It'll take 2 or 3 to really get that speed factor back up. They need more things than that, of course. It takes more than just speed to build a college football team, but that's the one thing that really stands out as being very different from the Florida teams that we saw in the past. And listen, I know they're breaking in a new quarterback, and it's only Billy Napier's second year. It was the first game of the season, and it was against Utah. I got all that. But we're seeing the same thing out of Florida that we saw last year and at the tail end of 21, and that is they just are not as fast or as athletic as what we're used to seeing. So hopefully Billy Napier can get that back on track. All right, the third thing tonight, LSU and Florida State. Listen, that LSU-Florida State matchup, Georgia is loaded with NFL talent, no doubt. Alabama is loaded with NFL talent. Ohio State is loaded with NFL talent. I would be perfectly happy taking the players off of LSU and Florida State, that roster, for the next 2 drafts in the NFL, and just letting other people, fight over what's on the other teams. LSU and Florida State is an absolutely loaded matchup in terms of future NFL draft picks. I'm going to list off a few guys I was ready to watch, but these two teams were so loaded. It was even less about the matchup. The matchup was a little sloppy. We kind of expected that when you have that many good athletes on the field, and you just kind of expect that that's going to be a little bit of a sloppy-ish kind of a game, not a great flow in either direction at either time. You can kind of expect that. But what you did want to see was who's going to stand out. When there's that many fantastic, I mean premium, high-quality, first-round NFL-level type talent running around out there on the field for these two teams, who's going to stand out on a night like that? So here were the names I was looking at heading into the game. For Florida State, Jared Verse, Johnny Wilson, wide receiver, Keon Coleman, wide receiver, Jordan Travis, the quarterback, Jaheim Bell, the tight end, Fabian Lovett, Trey Benson, Maurice Smith, Robert Scott, Patrick Payton, a couple of the defensive backs. Loaded with Florida State. I mean, the Seminoles, we haven't seen this in a while, but they're back. They would have been back even if they lost the LSU game, but they're back in terms of talent. And then on the LSU side, Jaden Daniels, quarterback, Mason Smith, who missed the game at defensive tackle, wide receiver Malik Neighbors, Harold Perkins, linebacker, Omar Speight, somewhere between safety and linebacker hybrid, Mekhi Wingo, defensive tackle, Brian Thomas, Charles Turner, Savion Jones, Major Burns, Braden Swinson, and even a couple more wide receivers that didn't even make the list. You talk about two teams that are just flooded with NFL, future prospects. These two teams had it. And so I was really looking forward to seeing who would jump off the page in a game like that. And I really thought there were about 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys or groups. And I'm going to start with Mekhi Wingo, defensive tackle for LSU. Mason Smith might be the best defensive tackle on LSU's team. He missed the game. He wasn't able to play. Mekhi Wingo in the first half was completely unstoppable. If you're looking for a defensive tackle, to get to the quarterback, during that first half of the Florida State game, Mekhi Wingo from the defensive tackle position was consistently, repeatedly unstoppable on almost every play in terms of getting to the quarterback. He was a wrecking machine. Now, in the second half, Florida State took a lot more time. They started keeping more people in terms of guys on the edges on the offensive line, adding tight ends, adding running backs, two running backs. They kept more people in, but they also made sure specifically they could double team. And there was even 1 or 2 cases where they were triple teaming Mekhi Wingo on every single play. And also you wonder, first game of the season, the humidity level, if that didn't have maybe some effect on Mekhi Wingo in the second half. But listen, in the first half, Mekhi Wingo, surely his draft stock had to rise on a night like that where he's going up against excellent talent, against an excellent team, and he was unstoppable. Just repeatedly, consistently getting to the quarterback and making the quarterback run all over the place. Big night, I thought, from Mekhi Wingo. I just thought he really stood out above anybody else. I mean, his first half performance, again, you didn't see it in the second half, but his first half performance, I thought, was just the most amazing thing that I'd seen really probably over the entire weekend. It was really special. So keep an eye out for Mekhi Wingo's stock going up. Defensive tackle was, again, it's a long season. We'll see what he does, but defensive tackle for LSU. Number 2, Keon Coleman. And I know that seems obvious, and he came over in the transfer portal from Michigan State, and I know a lot of people wanted him, and people were already kind of aware that he could be a pretty good receiver. It seems obvious because he scored 3 touchdowns, but the reason Keon Coleman is number 2 on this list out of my big winners of the night isn't because of the 3 touchdowns, but the way he made those catches. Some of them were contested, and he actually ripped the ball away from defensive backs. In some of those, he was able to showcase his speed. When a guy like Keon Coleman can showcase his speed against a secondary that is as fast and as athletic as LSU, listen, LSU's got safeties and defensive backs all over the field who have elite speed and elite athleticism. And Keon Coleman more than once not only out-physicaled them, pulling footballs away from them, but actually was able to showcase his speed in some cases too for huge chunks of yardage and for big gains. So even if the plays that he had done on on Sunday night had not translated into touchdowns, if it was just the plays themselves, he to me would have been the big number 2 winner here. He really seemed to showcase what he could do. Now again, he's got to show that all season long. We saw some of it at Michigan State. We need to see this all year long. Otherwise, he's not going to be a first-round draft pick. His stock will drop again. But listen, 3 touchdowns, you're going to get everybody's attention. And you might say, well, Johnny Wilson had a good night too, statistically. Johnny Wilson, in a lot of cases, Johnny Wilson's plays, he was already kind of open. And you say, well, he had the ability to get open. He did. But in a lot of cases, Johnny Wilson's catches on Sunday, and I'm a Johnny Wilson fan. At the moment, I'm looking at drafting him maybe in the 2nd round, possibly, if I'm an NFL team. I love the size and the height. But we didn't see Johnny Wilson necessarily showcase that height for jump balls, right? A lot of his stuff, he was already open at some point. And in most cases, we saw it where Jordan Travis had actually been able to scramble, extend a play, and you saw Wilson getting open because the play was just really chaotic. So I'm not deducting any points from Johnny Wilson, but Keon Coleman, both for speed and for ripping the ball away from defenders, was the guy that really popped off the field on Sunday night in a field full of athletes that are NFL caliber. So for me, wide receiver Keon Coleman out of Florida State was really the number 2 winner. Number 3 out of the people, Jared Verse, the edge rusher from Florida State. Most mock drafts, if you're already looking at that stuff, already have him top 5, top 10. So he's not sneaking up on anybody. But he showed Sunday, he showed that whenever they didn't use a tight end or a running back to kind of double team or chip him, he was able to get off the edge and get to the quarterback. Now, in the first half, they didn't do as much of it in the second half, I didn't think. Excuse me. In the first half, LSU made a very serious point to consistently chip, block, double team Jared Verse. And he really didn't get as many shots. But throughout the game, whenever they weren't double teaming, and listen, he got a lot of attention, so he didn't get as many shots. But even that in and of itself, that ability to suck resources away from the offense, where they're constantly having to put double teams, they're constantly having to put a tight end on that side just to slow, your 9 technique kind of a thing, just where they have to put a running back on that side. That consistently takes resources away from the Florida State, from the LSU offense, It consistently does that. And then when they don't double team him and they don't chip him and they don't devote resources to him, he's coming off the edge, beating his man on most occasions and getting the quarterback. So we expected this from Jared Verse, and we got it. He delivered. No reason to not have him still as a top 5, top 10 draft pick. And again, we'll see how he goes through the season. Number 5 is Jayden Daniels. And this is going to seem really weird because statistically, really on the night, Jordan Travis had the better night. There's no question about it, especially in the second half. In the first half, Jordan Travis was running for his life from specifically Mekhi Wingo. And in the second half, Jordan Travis really had a big night. But when I look at Jordan Travis, I don't yet see a guy that I truly want to draft. And you say, well, why not? He had a big night. He made a lot of plays. He was playing against a very, very talented defense. What's the problem here? And I don't mean to be negative, and I'm not saying that he can't be drafted. He might be, and he might even be a very successful NFL quarterback. We've seen guys do it. But some of the things I don't like that I see from Jordan Travis, he's not as fast as Jayden Daniels in terms of running. He's not as fast as Drake May. He's not as fast as Caleb Williams. That speed level, that extra speed level just isn't there, that extra gear. He can shift, he can move, he can make plays. That's valuable, but the extra speed isn't there. The ability to consistently throw the football downfield, we don't see that a lot. Most of his throws are usually, not always, but usually to open receivers. They're usually after he's kind of scrambled and made a play. And got, he's been able to extend the play. A lot of the passes to Johnny Wilson were that way. The passes to Keon Coleman were not. But you don't see Jordan Travis consistently challenging defenses down the field. And those are just some of the reasons why I don't have Travis rated very highly. Also, the accuracy is a bit of a thing. You don't see him consistently being accurate to guys. A lot of times it's behind some of the guys. So Travis had the big night. Jayden Daniels had a heck of a first half, but Jayden Daniels is, I think, just right there with Drake May in terms of his legs. You talk about that smooth ability to just accelerate. Jayden Daniels has that. If he catches a lane, he can quickly go 10, 15, 20 yards. And then he too, just like Drake May, has that ability to step cut like a running back does, or even a wide receiver, maybe a slot receiver, do a step cut, and then all of a sudden Jayden Daniels too can beat you for 30 or 40 yards. He has that capability. And that's what is next level there about Jayden Daniels. Now, what I don't like about Jayden Daniels is still the arm strength. I mean, he still can't beat people downfield. You just don't see it. But that electric speed, combined with, I think Jayden Daniels is just as good a passer as Jordan Travis, is why I would have Jayden Daniels as a higher potential draft pick and draft prospect than Travis at this point. Both guys, there's not a huge difference there, but I would have Jayden Daniels maybe somewhere on 4th or 5th round draft pick. Travis, I would be on the verge of drafting or not drafting, depending on what team I'm looking at there. So I think my last thing here for the LSU-Florida State game is the defensive backs. The Florida State defensive backs. I'm not going to name any of them, but as a group, they were unbelievable. The LSU receivers, starting with Malik Neighbors, but there's Brian Thomas. There's about 2 more guys. There's about 4 receivers there for LSU who either this year or next year have a very good chance of being in the NFL. They're fast, they're athletic, they're strong, and they were really quiet on Sunday. Repeatedly, we heard the announcer say, and it was true, nobody's open for LSU. Jayden Daniels can't find anybody to throw to because there's just nobody open. And that was because the Florida State defensive backs did an amazing job, just an absolutely fantastic, wonderful job. You didn't see them have a lot of busting coverage. LSU defensive backs, who are actually even more, they're faster and more athletic, I think, than the Florida State guys. But you saw a lot of defensive breakdowns from the LSU secondary, and I mean a lot. You didn't see that from Florida State. You talk about a unit that looked organized, a unit that looked aggressive, a unit that just seemed to be very intelligent about where they should be on the field and about how to handle the LSU receivers, who are incredibly gifted. The Florida State defensive backs just did an outstanding job the entire game of that. I was so impressed by Florida State's ability to do that, and I don't know that they weren't the MVP of the game, to be honest. Florida State defensive backs, that defensive backfield, their ability to not have hardly anybody open at any time for LSU and for Jayden Daniels to throw to was incredibly impressive. I just can't say enough about that. I'm not going to call out any of the specific names here tonight because we've already called out too many here. But that Florida State defensive backfield, unbelievably good. If they can literally smother that way for the rest of the year, then Florida State has a very good chance of being in the playoffs and maybe even thinking about a national title game. They're that good. We'll see. It's a long season. Lots of things can happen. But again, unbelievably impressed. Last but not least, everybody's talking about him. Deion Sanders. I love it, man. Keep shaking football up. I have watched Deion Sanders since about 1990 when he was an outfielder for the Yankees and when he was playing for the Atlanta Falcons. And then I watched him turn into the best defensive back in football, maybe in history, when he's playing for the Cowboys and the 49ers. And then I got to watch him platoon for the Braves. Deion Sanders has been entertaining us for a very long time. He did it again over the weekend, not only with the major upset victory over Texas Christian, but also with his somewhat controversial press conference afterward. But Deion, keep it up. You're very entertaining. Keep shaking up football, and we appreciate it. All right. I think I've jabbered enough. Let me tell you a couple more things. I'm on several different platforms now. One of those, the newest, is called Arena in the Boardroom. And I apologize. At the moment, I know they're on LinkedIn, and I will try to put the links to that on X, on Twitter as well. But that's called Arena in the Boardroom. That tends to, as you might have guessed, cover more about money and finances than it does anything else. I'm on there. I'm on the Stat Sheet podcast. That's on Apple and Spotify. We cover basically NFL games every week. Anything newsworthy in the NFL, we cover. I'm on the Odds On Favorite podcast, which is also on Apple and Spotify and where you get your podcast at. We're on there as well. We're covering during the season. We pick the most interesting 5 to 7 games, and then we talk about the lines involved in those games and what the odds are. We go pretty in depth on that as well. So listen, I'm all over the place. I appreciate y'all watching. Thank y'all for watching this. We'll see y'all next time. Have a great one. Bye.